Welcome to the Kemetamorphysis podcast, where we explore the possibilities and processes of personal and community transformation based on the ancient wisdom of Kemet, one of many classical African civilizations, as a foundation. I am Dr. Catherine Lynn Adams, an associate professor of African and African American Studies at Claflin University, where I teach courses on oral and literary traditions of the Africana world, with an emphasis on interviewing and archiving the stories of our elders. I am serving as a scribe for this project. Joining me is Baba Derrick Jackson. Baba Derrick is the priest and thought leader of Krst Universal Temple, a spiritual community in South Carolina. Krst Universal Temple is not about a man, but a mission. It is not about a messenger, but God's message. It is not about a moment, but a movement towards our higher selves. In the year 2000, the temple was established as an African-centered, faith-based organization to help individuals, families, and communities to achieve their full spiritual, economic, social, and educational potential. In each episode, I will ask Baba Derrick to talk about a singular topic related to spirituality, theology, community building, human relationships, and African consciousness. This is a journey to document and preserve more than 2 decades of work. We invite you to like and subscribe to receive notifications for future episodes. Thank you for listening. Today we are here with Baba Derrick Jackson, and we want to begin this podcast by asking the question, what is Kemetamorphysis?
Well, Kemetamorphysis, as we view it here at Krst Universal Temple, is the process one goes through in their transformation from this anti-African reality that we live in that has taught us to hate ourselves. And so in order for us to get back to who we are, as a group of people, then there needs to be a process that we go through. And what we do is we name the problem without coming up with the idea, how do you move past that problem? And there's many books written, there's a lot of oral stories about what the problem is, but I don't find a whole lot of answers to that problem. And so Kemetamorphysis is a process. And in this process, we're using Kemet as a way of teaching us who we are by using, as one author said, our story of stories to tell us not just who am I, but what am I to do?
Can you tell me something about where the term Kemetamorphysis comes from?
Yeah, it's my visit to Egypt in 2000. I felt like I was being sat into I don't want to call it a vacuum, but be something like I was being transferred through time and space. In that we were on a ship for 11 of the 14 days we were there. And every evening, me and a few of the people who were on the tour with me had a chance to go to the top deck and just look at the sky. And we noticed how close the sky was and that you could see clearly the universe in such a way you don't need a telescope. And that really drew us every evening. And you have these people sitting up here looking at the top of the deck and having no conversation. Each one of us are time traveling in our own way. So that's when I began to think about Kemet, and then being in the clinical laboratory science, the idea of morphosis, that change that comes about when you're looking at the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, the tadpole becoming a frog. It's the same process that I started to equate human development with. And so that's kind of how it came about. Now, I'm probably not the only person in the world who's come up with the idea of Kemetamorphysis, but that was my thinking at the time.
Had you thought about the connection between human beings and the cosmos before that trip?
Yes, I had thought about it only because, but I thought about it through books. I thought about it through video. It's a difference when you experience it. that's a that's a whole nother level, you know, that I knew about intellectually because I had friends. And trust me, going with Anthony Browder, who, because we are friends, you'll hear me call him Tony sometimes. So forgive me for saying, calling him Tony, because I've known him over 30 something years. So, um, but being on that trip with him gave me an experience of only things I thought about that I only knew intellectually. And I began to feel it in my heart. And as we say here in the United States, among the Iusa people, in my soul. And that, and now that you got me thinking about it, my first experience with knowing that I was about to enter into another zone is when we landed on the tarmac in Cairo. Then we stayed in Cairo overnight. Next day, 6 a.m., we had to take a flight. So that means you have to be at the airport like 4:30 in the morning. And so we were at the airport, and then we loaded up on the plane. I was there with maybe one person that I knew on a personal level. Everybody else, we were meeting each other for the first time. So I'm sitting next to a brother I'd never met before. Come to find out, he was from Atlanta, and he didn't know me and I didn't know him. He was sitting at the window seat. He decided to lift up the shade on the window, and we both fell so silent and was mesmerized at seeing where the sun was at 6 a.m. in Cairo, Egypt. It looked like we could reach our hand out and touch it. And it looked like it was rising up from the tarmac. And now I said, that's what Kepler looks like. See, I read about Kepler, but to see it at 6 a.m. in the morning on the tarmac of an airport, it was fabulous. And then he finally turned and he looked at me and he said, are you seeing what I'm seeing? I said, yeah, I'm seeing what you said. He said, that is magnificent. I'm getting a chill now just talking about it. And so, yeah, that was the beginning. I didn't know it at the time that it was going to be that life altering, that transformation, or the three words we like to talk about at the temple, um, improvisation, transcendence, and transformation. but it was a transformative. And then to have the experience of sitting at the top deck of a boat along the Nile, not a boat, but a ship. I better rephrase that. And then every day at 5 a.m., Tony would have us up going to see the different monuments. And then by him starting the tour, the purpose in being at the airport at that day was to fly to Luxor. And then from Luxor, we took a bus down to Abydos. And that's where we began our tour in Abydos, and then came up, or as they say, down the Nile to the various places and monuments. And so that was a great idea by Tony to start at Abydos, that beginning. And that taught me always start at the beginning.
So if the trip to Kemet was the beginning of a transformation, what were you doing before the trip?
Intellectualizing things that I had read, that I felt, but not on the level that it became once I took the trip. You know how you read something, you know it's right, and you understand it in a particular way. So before then, it was just gathering information, really. The books are good, but going to Kemet was a defining moment for me. And then I was teaching. I didn't know prior to Kemet that I have been on this journey most of my adult life, because I didn't reflect prior to going to Kemet all the things that had come my way and the places I've been and the things I've done, how information came to me on theology and spirituality and following that roadmap of Christianity, of knowing something is not right. Can't put my finger on it. But I had questions always. And in fact, I was in 97, I think, around 96, 97. One of my good friends asked me to come teach a group of Black people who had started a temple in Colombia called Imani Temple. And Imani Temple was part of Black Catholics who had left the Catholic Church. And their headquarters was in Washington, D.C., but they had a franchise here in Colombia. And it was called Imani Temple number 84.
Imani means faith,
right? Imani meaning faith. And he had heard me talk about Christianity, and he had heard me in doing lectures on Blacks in the Bible kind of idea at that particular time in my life. And he said, well, we have a Friday Bible study. I think they would love to hear from you. And so that's what I was doing, teaching Christianity from a Black perspective. Or now I can look back and say it was actually an African perspective. But at the time, Black was the most common way to identify ourselves.
So you at the Imani Temple teaching in those Bible study sessions, how much time between that and when you traveled to Kemet?
About 3 to 4 years, approximately in that area. Because I traveled to Kemet about 2000. So it's about 4 years.
So what's the origin story, or what's the relationship between Imani Temple and Krst Universal?
That is the place where Imani Temple is actually where I became ordained as a priest under the African American Catholic congregation known as the AACC. And it was under the leadership of an Archbishop, George Stallings, out of Washington, D.C. And I became the priest of Imani Temple through Stallings coming to Columbia, finding out about me teaching, and then saying to me, "You ever thought about being a priest?" And I'm looking at him like, "You must be crazy." And really saying to him, "I think you lost your mind," thinking that I could be a priest. And then he looked at me and laughed, and he said, "But I'm serious." "You are? You really serious about that?" And spirits say, don't say no before you consider it, right? And I've always been a person to pay attention to spirit, right? So I came home, told my wife about it. She said, "Well, what do you think you've been doing?" For the last, she went back further. She said, for the last 10 years, right? She said, "You've been reading up on everything." It's not much that they're going to teach you other than ritual and ceremony that you haven't already on your own studied and tried to practice. And I said, okay. So I took literally 90 days to make that decision. And that decision came up. Why 90 days, somebody might ask, is because there's an old Native American idea about, if you're going to do something, take 90 days to think about making that move, because it gives you an opportunity to reflect, for spirit to talk to you, and to hear the voices of the people who surround you. And so for me, that was part, because I didn't just study Christianity. I tried to study other groups and how they saw the world. And so I kind of took that away from that it always resonated with me, this idea of 90 days, or what they call 3 moons. And so that's what I did. And people who I knew, who I had personal relationships with, kept saying the same thing over and over, Dr. Adams. And I'm saying, I'm hearing the same, and they don't know each other, If they knew each other, then I think it was a collaboration. But when you hear these voices from people who did not know each other, you start saying, maybe the ancestors trying to tell me something. And so after the 90 days was up, I decided to go through the training to become a priest. And then I became a priest at the temple. And then an incident happened, which we can talk about at another time, that there were some of us at Imani Temple who had to separate from the AACC.
We want to archive something special that was established in 2000, more than 2 decades ago. This is our inaugural episode. In upcoming episodes, we will be exploring the history of Krst Universal Temple, its teachings on spirituality and personal growth, and its role in the Columbia, South Carolina community. We invite you to like and subscribe to receive notifications for future episodes. Thank you again for listening.